Hello, NASCAR fans. Welcome to our weekly NASCAR race rewind. This time for the I think let me see if I get it right. The Goody's Headache Relief 500 at Martinsville Speedway. Did I do that all right, Nan?
That sounds right.
I'm Charlie Turner. He's Dan Beaver. We're going to rush this one a little bit today because we have an iffy internet connection between Texas and the satellite and us. So we're going to see if we can't get this one in without an interruption. So interesting race won by Dale Earnhardt Jr., who I don't know that he was one of the favorites going into that thing, but he certainly had a good car and had a righteous win, I would say. What do you think?
He certainly wasn't a favorite to win, but he was a favorite to finish in the top 10, so it wasn't a huge surprise. And by the way, there are a lot of good things about living in small-town Texas. Internet access, not one of them.
Yeah, well, sometimes that's a good thing, you know.
Yeah, but no, he expected him to run well enough. Did not expect him to run as tough as he did in the final laps, and especially knowing with that teammate question still hovering out there. Right. Would he lay over for Gordon? Even if he didn't lay over to give him the win, would he lay over to give him a spot in line? And late in the race, he answered that question twice. He didn't let Gordon in, shuffled him back to, I think, 5th or 6th, and then he charged through there and took care of himself, which he should have. Absolutely, the way it should have played out, but it had to be at least a little bit of a surprise to some people, I think.
Yeah, well, I think it sort of was to me. I was glad to see it, glad to see that Earnhardt was racing for the win, regardless of team considerations, those kinds of things. You know, he's very close to Mr. Hendrick, and Gordon's the last of the Hendrick place markers in this chase thing. So I could have seen him. You know, you could see some reasons why he might move over, but he didn't. And I think that's good for the sport and good for Junior.
And during one of that late race restart, when he could have let him in front of him, you could almost see him thinking. It was almost as if he laid back just a little bit and then decided, no, I can't do that, right. And went for it. So, no matter what you were pulling for, I think Earnhardt did the right thing. And in the long run, it actually wasn't all that bad for Earnhardt because it took one of the races out of play, and now there are at least 2 points earners that are going to make it to the final round. So it didn't hurt Gordon nearly as much as it could have.
No, actually, I think that when a non-chase winner wins one of these races, it's good for the good drivers. It's good for the drivers who have the better equipment. It's less of a potentially fluky, somebody qualifying. So I agree with you there. Let me run down the top 10 real quick before we get into this and before we lose our connection. Of course, Junior finished first. And led 79 laps. Jeff Gordon, second place, led 130. So, I mean, it's not like Gordon didn't have a good car at Martinsville. Ryan Newman, another chaser, finished third. Newman's got a very strong run going in this chase thing. Tony Stewart, fourth, good finish for Stewart. Logano, fifth, just like he's been all year. He's been strong. Matt Kenseth, another chaser, in sixth. Clint Boyer, seventh. Boyer ran up front for a lot, led 33 laps. Joey Logano led 60. Denny Hamlin in eighth place with 68 laps led. So Hamlin had another good run on a flat track where he's no stranger. AJ Allmendinger, ninth. David Reagan, big surprise, I think, in 10th. What do you get from any of that?
Some good storylines. Tony Stewart's top 5 definitely would fit as something that you'd write about at the end of the race. Joey Logano now has a perfect record of top 5s on unrestricted speedways during the chase. That's got to bode well for his chances going forward. Yeah, David Reagan, 10th in that Wendell Scott tribute car with Darrell Wallace Jr. winning the truck race. Wendell Scott was well represented this week. So there are a number of good stories in there. Clint Boyer keeping his top 10 streak alive. Jimmy Johnson not keeping his top 10 streak alive, I think, is another major story that came out of this. And then, of course, Brad Keselowski digging yet another hole for himself. So there was a lot going on in 500 laps. And it took a while to get it in. I think that was more than 4 hours. Almost 4.5 hours?
It was a long race.
Yeah. Actually, the I guess flag to flag, it was 3:43, but from the time we sat down to the time we got away from the TV, it was well over 4.
Yeah, it seemed like 5. So, but I
Yeah, they don't count
started
the
I
red
started
flag.
early Sunday because my Detroit Lions were playing at 9:30 in the morning Eastern time. So it was a long day for me sports wise.
Yeah, I saw that in the last minute kick to give them one.
Yeah,
So the Brits got a good game out of that, and they're
they
going to go
did.
to London 6 times next year, or more times than they did this year. So
Three times this year, and they are upping it. They're edging towards that. That inevitable. It looks like London franchise for the NFL, which I don't get at all. I mean, can you imagine traveling from LA to London and back on a 2-week period? I mean,
yeah, and they'll probably put them in the West Coast leagues.
yeah, that could be. All right. So anyway, enough about that football stuff. The last of the short tracks for the year. Now we go, well, unless you consider Phoenix a short track. I really don't. Um, Done with the half miles.
I don't consider it a short track, but I certainly would consider it a comparative track to Martinsville because they're both flat and relatively short. So I think that one thing that we saw in this race was not just what's going on in these 500 laps, but them positioning themselves for the 500K race, not 500 miles, at Phoenix here in a couple of weeks. So it was important. This race was important more than just the race in and of itself. It's also notable, I think, that we had quite a few non-chasers in that top 10.
Yeah, we
The
did.
competition's getting tougher for that. I think we could see the next couple of races go to non-chasers. Kyle Busch is going to be strong at Texas.
Yep.
Phoenix, the most likely people are the ones that you already know about or think about, but that doesn't mean that someone can't spoil uh, the show there. And we're still waiting on Larson to get his first win, which could come on either one of these two tracks. He would have gotten another top 15 if he hadn't overcooked the corner and ran over Marcus Ambrose. But that's what rookies are supposed to do. They're supposed to make mistakes, and we've gotten spoiled where Larson's concerned because he doesn't make very many mistakes. So I think he was another good storyline or another uh, compelling storyline that came out of this race.
Post race, Kevin Harvick says that he's going to exact revenge on Matt Kenseth, which is kind of ironic after Kenseth being the harmed party at Charlotte not too many weeks ago, a couple weeks ago. Is this stuff getting too far out of the? We getting carried away with this stuff, or what do you think? Is it a function of the coverage, or do we really have these things going on?
No, I don't think so. I think it's a function of the chase, and
Yeah.
it's like each week the intensity level ratchets up just one more notch. By the end of it, I think we're going to be like Spinal Tap. Our amp's going to have to go to 11 to accommodate it. It's NASCAR has gotten almost everything they wanted out of this chase, and the one thing that they haven't got necessarily, or that we don't know if they're going to have, is whether or not the best team is going to win. And right now, with Ryan Newman and Matt Kenseth both finishing the top 6, both among the top 4 in chase contenders at Martinsville, we could end up going to Homestead with a 50-50 chance of having a winless champion. We get it. Try explaining that to anybody else in the sports world, how you could have 36 races and crown someone a champion who doesn't win a single one of 36 events. But let's hope it doesn't happen. Let's hope that either Kenseth or Newman wins the race if they stay in contention, or they get knocked out of contention. But it's the one thing I think that NASCAR didn't anticipate well enough for this chase, or they just don't care, and kind of hard to know where they are, what they're thinking sometimes.
I think they have to be happy up till now. I mean, we won't know if they're extremely happy until the whole thing's over with, I guess. But we'll see.
I think that's the only thing to spoil it. Right up until now, though, we've had the intensity level. We've had people talking about it. We've had non-race fans talking about it. They've gotten everything they wanted out of the chase, except for that one thing that we anticipate could go wrong, and it might not. But we shouldn't be talking about that this late in the season, in my mind.
I agree. Well, we're going to Texas next week. It'll be a totally different type of race. Obviously, very fast, 1.5 mile track in your neck of the woods. And I agree with you. I think Kyle Busch looks good there, non-chaser. So if another non-chaser wins, we're gonna have one race potentially, maybe no, like you say, no race winners in the final. It'll be interesting. We'll talk about that next week and maybe a little bit more on the On Pit Row Hangout in a little bit here. But any final thoughts on the Goody's Headache Relief 500 at Martinsville Speedway?
We need more short tracks. Got to get more short track racing on the schedule somehow. And I know NASCAR, it's not the way NASCAR wants to go, but man, is that fun.
Yeah, it is. I mean, they got to figure. You're right. They've got to figure out a way. I think maybe midweek, a couple of midweek races, and stick a couple short tracks in here. Get Iowa involved. Get maybe Irwindale. I don't know. I take your pick. There's a few out there I'd love to see in the series, but we'll talk about that again some other time. He is Dan Beaver. Follow Dan on Twitter at Fantasy Race. Read all of his fantasy racing articles at yahoosports.com and rotoworld.com. Come back next week when we rewind the big race, the AAA 400, I believe it is, at Texas Motor Speedway. And watch us in the other hangouts this week, the live On Pit Row and NASCAR hangout, and we'll be doing a fantasy preview of that AAA 400 later in the week. I'm Charlie Turner. Thanks, everybody, for joining us, and enjoy the racing. We'll talk to you soon.